give everybody a chance to join us. We'll get a martini going here. You can get into the birds and bees.
What are we drinking, Ashley?
We are drinking a classic vodka martini made with Tito's.
All right. Hope everybody has their drink on a Thursday afternoon. Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
And welcome to Martinis with Scott. How's that fade?
That's great.
That better?
Yeah.
Lindsay, we need our music. Is it Lindsay? Is that who's doing it?
Is it?
We need our music.
I know. She's on it. She's in the studio.
Working hard.
We're having our own theme song produced in Nashville. Hopefully it's coming soon.
Best place to have a theme song produced, I hear, is Nashville.
Yeah, why wouldn't it be? All right, with Martinis with Scott, episode 6. Welcome. And today we're going to do part 2 of the series that we started, in fact, last week. Part 2 to help you get a troubled business financed. And I'm here again with Olga Jilani of Sinclair Range.
Hi, everyone.
Which reminds me that Martinis with Scott are brought to you, as always, by Sinclair Range, which is a management consulting firm that helps companies, management teams through a rapid transition. Could be a troubled company, could be a high growth situation. You need to get from here to there over a 3-month, 6-month, 12-month, sometimes 2-year period at the longest, I would hope. And we do the related transaction, the investment banking that often goes along with that. If there's a sale that's required or refinancing with a bank, check us out. SinclairRange.com. Also on SinclairRange.com is the website is a blog format, so a lot of the issues that we talk about in Martinis with Scott are followed up or preceded with a written blog post that hopefully people will find useful. As I said, we're episode 6, and I'm told that I should, every episode, give people a little insight as to where to listen to this thing, if you're not live on Periscope. So we are live on Periscope. You can go to Periscope, Martinis with Scott. Ashley, correct me at some point if I'm wrong. We can go to Martinis with Scott on Periscope. You can watch live, and you can also watch the recorded afterwards. And other platforms that you could look at, if you want to watch the show with the video, there's a Facebook channel. So you just go, there's a, there is a Facebook channel as well. And you go to Facebook and you can search Martinis with Scott and you can watch the episodes on there. And a YouTube channel, same thing. Go to YouTube, just in the search section, type in Martinis with Scott, and a bunch of them will, all of them will pop up. And better yet, subscribe on the YouTube channel, and then
hit your notifications so you know when. Hit
notifications.
Yeah.
There you go. You know more about YouTube than I do. If you're driving, walking through an airport like I am all the time, heading to Detroit, you know who you are, and you just want to listen to the podcast, have something playing in your ears as you go, then we're available on iTunes. So you go to the podcast section and you search Martinis with Scott, and we're there relatively brand new. I think that we've been there a week or maybe 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
So the big platforms for us so far have been the Periscope and the YouTube channel. The podcast is starting to get a little bit of traction, but not very much yet. So I think that'll pick up over time.
For sure.
And the Facebook, I don't even think people have started to realize that it's on Facebook yet. We are brand new. But I did notice, last night I was looking through some stats, and we have already in our young life here, have exceeded the average stats on podcasting. We have more viewers / listeners than
The average
than the mean.
podcast.
Yeah, which is great. So this may actually be working. Because people may find this helpful.
I never doubted it for a second.
I did.
Okay.
There you go. All right. So as I said, Olga Jilani is Vice President at Sinclair Range. We'll skip the introduction. If you want to know more about Olga, last week's episode 5, we went over your biography in great depth.
Yeah.
You've been Sinclair Range for 6 years.
Yep.
What's going on this week at Sinclair Range?
Oh, we had a lot going on. One of the companies that we manage landed a new client. We're working through that. Very large order for us. We're working.
That's the Lowe's. Is that what you're saying? The
Yes.
first order? I was on the phone with them, walking in the room, and we're confirmed.
Excellent.
Yeah.
It's a big deal for us. I mean, I think they could easily be 30% of sales if it all builds up properly. That's a big one for us. We're doing some real estate that we own. We're doing some work there, and we're helping our clients specifically on the financial side, not troubled businesses, but startups, high growth companies. We're active with them in terms of building models, helping them on the operations side, working through the assumptions with them. Those are kind of big things happening this week.
Great. So last week we introduced a series on how to finance a troubled company. And the premise here is that financing a company that has been in or is in financial difficulty requires a different process and a different presentation or a different pitch, if you want to put it that way, than lending to getting financing for a stable company. And lenders, what we talked about, are looking for security. They're looking for debt service coverage. In other words, do you have enough money to pay the interest and principal on this new loan when it's due? And they're looking for integrity, which means management and financial results. And troubled companies sometimes don't have all three of those things in place.
But before we get into troubled companies are not our only clients. They're not the only groups that we deal with. I think generally, like we mentioned last week, it's hard to understand when you're in trouble. So there's probably very few managers out there Googling, how to finance a troubled company. They're Googling how to finance a company.
Right.
So even if you're a startup, if you're experiencing high growth, if you're a young company, I think this is generally good advice, both from a management standpoint and from a financing standpoint, of how to, first of all, avoid getting into trouble.
Yeah.
And if you're going to go finance and find a equity partner or a lender, this is good advice for any company if you can just remove the trouble part. And on top of that, it's a good way to evaluate where you stand with lenders, where maybe you don't consider yourself a trouble company, but a bank or an investor might.
True. I agree with that. Although, ironically, today's specific topic is very specific to troubled companies.
Yes.
It is. Okay, and we're going to get into that. This is we've presented 10 points in the overview last week, and each point or tip for financing the troubled business will be covered in an individual podcast periscope within this series. So I don't want to spend a bunch of time on the list again. You can go back to last week's episode 5, and you'll get more detail on the comprehensive list. And also, probably within the week, you can go to the sinclairrange.com website and check out the written article on this as well. But just quickly, 10 tips that serve as the roadmap for this is number 1, which we covered last week, was to just admit that you're in trouble, right? Because so many troubled companies, particularly when they go out to market, just skip over the fact that they're financially troubled. I didn't mention this last week, but it always makes me laugh that you see from other intermediaries and brokers and consultants, and they call you and say, "I've got a great deal. Can you help on this?" Right? You got clients that are interested in this. Maybe you guys are interested in it as principal. I got a great deal, and they walk you through. It's in this industry. This is my management team. This is
this
is
the
where
industry's
it's
on
going,
fire. The
right?
management has crazy amounts of experience. Yeah.
And then you say, "Cool," and then they send over the package.
We're like,
and it's a troubled company.
we've actually said we've gotten mandates for help us manage the growth, help us manage the sales, help us kind of define our path. All of these other things are great. The industry's taking off, and then we get the financial package, and we're like, you guys are insolvent.
Yeah.
We've said that this has actually happened.
Yeah.
The pitch is up here, and when you see it, you're like,
right.
You need way more help.
So as a lender, if you're talking about integrity of management, as a lender or an investor, you're just like, these guys just don't get it.
Yeah.
And we see that a lot. Anyways, I should have mentioned that last week, but that's the first point. Today, identify what the trouble is and the people that are responsible for that trouble. So that would be number 2. Number 3 is make a plan to fix the problem. Number 4 is communicate that plan in a written business plan and a monthly rolling financial model. And number 5 is the 13-week cash flow, sort of more of the same thing. 6, understand your security value. 7, understand the universe of lenders and the lending structure, because there's a whole world out there beyond, in Canada, the chartered banks or the national banks or the international banks. There's a whole world beyond that. There's a bunch of funds that are available for businesses that are a little offside on covenants, or right through to significantly troubled. Expect to pay more. Cost of funds are going to be higher. Expect to report more. It's going to be more cumbersome, and look for different options like selling the business and strategic partners and joint ventures and that sort of thing. So we're going to cover every one of those points, but that's the list, our inside secret.
Yeah.
On how to finance troubled companies.
And on top of that, I mean, in your experience, or my experience with you, when we have turned around troubled companies, we get troubled companies whether we actually take them over, we supplement management. What I've noticed is that even if we drive them into a positive EBITDA, and a very strong positive EBITDA, we're not like $63 for the year, which is exciting if you were, down $6 million. Yeah, exactly.
EBITDA, by the way, is earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation, amortization, and is often it's used as a proxy for cash flow.
So even when we get it, in the black, the way we function, I think it works really well, is that we never actually stop executing at any of these points. We never stop looking over the 13-week cash flow. We never stop with, assessing a business plan and a monthly rolling model. We keep treating it as a company that is vulnerable or fragile until we either exit from our mandate or we sell the company, in which case we have no control over it.
We do stop blaming the CFO, though.
That's a good. Well, we stop. Yeah. Well, we give credit where credit's due for sure. But we, although this topic is geared towards troubled companies, we recommend that the fixers on this continue even when the company is in a stable position.
Yes. Yeah. The tools are always relevant. So
it's very easy to fall right
the
back.
Models that you're talking about and the plans and the external advisors, we use the exact same tools in high growth situations and maintenance situations. That's really what you're getting at there, right? Okay. So we're going to be shorter today than the hour and 10 odd minutes we've dragged on for no particular reason last week.
Yeah.
But the point today that we're going to cover quickly here is point number 2, which is to identify the actual trouble that you are in and the people, specifically the people that were responsible for that. And the attitude here is that this is a failing of management. Okay. Now, you may think as a business owner that that's not fair, right? You may think you're a victim. You may think no one in your organization is responsible, right? And I'm not here to argue with you whether that's true or not. But what I am going to tell you is that this is about getting your business financed, even though it's in trouble. And you have to think, I think you made a comment before about integrity and
having a plan as a way to
no, but meeting a lender, you've never met this person.
Yeah.
Right? Or you have an intermediary like us or an advisor like us who maybe has a good relationship with them, but we're not the borrower.
Of course.
Right? So you have to persuade the lender. So how do you do that? And And from the lender's perspective, for them to have a positive feeling about an opportunity, is they have to have the belief that the management team and the owners, who may be the same people, that they have a clear understanding of why things went wrong. Who was responsible for the problem, and a plan to fix it. That's what persuades and convinces a lender. In short, are you willing to admit that you have this trouble, that you caused it, and are you willing to take the hard decisions to fix it?
Because nobody who's even remotely sophisticated, and never underestimate the sophistication of your lender, especially those that are experienced. No one wants to invest to fund a previously failed plan. What you're really offering, if you don't have a plan, what you're really saying is I want to keep failing, but with someone else's money. And that's not a very good pitch, and you're not going to survive for very long.
But it is a very pitch that lenders hear
all the time.
Over and over and over.
I just need more time, I need more runway, and something will turn. We're talking about betting the farm. Yeah.
Let's talk about why you're in trouble. Okay. And the most important thing I want to tell you is that the reason for being in trouble, for having a troubled company, can never be related to you being a victim, right? Which is what 90% or 99% of all troubled companies, and again, we're focusing on mid-market, smaller businesses, not the larger, Fortune whatever companies. But in mid-market, smaller, almost all the time, you hear the pitch. Well, we didn't get the big contract that we were waiting for. It's going to come next quarter. It's going to come in a year. We thought we were going to have it. We ramped up for it. Right? I hired all these people. I ordered all the inventory, and then the order didn't come in. So now I'm out of money. Or there was a regulatory event.
Yeah.
As another example. I mean, there could be a million reasons for this, but there's a regulatory event. Maybe somebody in my shop did something wrong, or maybe we didn't realize as a company that this manufacturing process was offside with something, right? We didn't learn about that, and all of a sudden we've got a multi-million-dollar claim against us. What would be another example? Cycles.
Yeah.
Right, so look at the oil and gas industry. I didn't know that was going to blow up. We have all these people. We have all these rigs. Woe was me. What could I possibly do about that? Right. So it's victim thinking, and it's wrong, and it's not to say that it's fair, and it's not to say that you might not think that that's correct, but it's not going to get your deal done.
No one wants to fund a victim mentality if you don't have control. You don't want to fund the person who's openly saying, I don't have control of the situation.
Right.
I can't fix it. You straight up told someone you can't fix it.
What they've said is, if you go to a lender with that attitude and with that pitch and that explanation, effectively what you're saying is, I was wrong. I didn't get this order in when I thought it was going to come in, but I want you to fund my bet that I'm going to be right next time.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, think of it that way. Would you do that?
Put yourself in the lender's shoes. It's simple as that, right?
Right. So what you need to do is you need to take a much harder line on yourself and your organization, and you need to say, this is our fault. I thought this was coming in, or this fellow over here told me it was coming in. It didn't, and that was a serious mistake. So what are we going to do to make sure that never happens again? That has to be your attitude on this.
It's a hard one to adopt, especially if you've caught yourself in the cycle of this victimhood, right?
Yeah. Somewhere we did a post or wrote an article. I took a quote out from it. It's not a quote from us. It's if I recall, it was from some CRO type fellow in the UK. CRO means Chief Restructuring Officer. It's in North America, it would be thought of as more of a court-ordered. Thank you. more of a court-ordered person to effect a turnaround and restructuring. Anyways, an expert in turning around businesses, and the quote is, effective management teams often say they need greater funding to correct the sagging business. But throwing money at a problem does not work. Those who created the problem in the first place will not know how to fix it. So providing them greater resources is a mistake. It wastes money and it degrades employee morale.
Have you ever met management teams that, they might not have the solution to the problem, but all the time, the answer is kind of an aggressive one, is to clean the house. But have you met management teams that still maintain some sort of value or know-how when you come in, the CRO or a chief transformation officer, where you can at least pick their brains to kind of get a little bit deeper and maybe come to the conclusion that they themselves can understand, because they're kind of you're on the outside looking in. Does that ever happen?
Hang on a second. I think you know that we preempt all serious business talk to shake a martini.
Sorry. Priorities. At least we have that.
Okay, give me your question again and phrase it a different way, because I didn't 100% follow.
So the quote, talks about, people who cause these problems don't know how to fix it. But that might not be, thank you, that might not be all the value. That they might bring some other value to the entire equation.
For sure they do.
Right, some sort of know-how, or give you a little bit more insight as to how they got to that problem. Maybe sometimes even not being aware that this is valuable insight to somebody who is making a change.
Yeah, and so a failing in a management team, and it doesn't have to be one person, it could be the entire team.
Yeah.
Right? In my view, it's situational. It's not that they're bad people. It's not that they're incompetent. It's not that they don't add value. It's that as a team, they failed in this specific instance.
How much of it is a failure of decision making versus communication within the team? How often do you see communication being
What's the
issues?
difference? I mean, really, what's the difference? If you part of being successful is to communicate with each other and act as a team.
Well, we all came together and we made this decision, as opposed to we made a bunch of fragmented decisions and we never communicated, and that's why our plan didn't work out.
There's a million reasons why teams fail, right? So it could be we're super cohesive, we're a cult type mentality, right? We nod along together. We have nothing but yes men, to use that expression. There's no dissent, or we're authoritarian, right? We have a leader who just says, "This is the way it is," and everybody says, "Cool." We're not really a team, right? Or you have complete, another extreme, you get a complete dysfunction within the team and lots of dissent. But at the end of the day, the organization, through its routines, which was a podcast that we did in the past, ends up making a decision and goes with it. And if the management team is dysfunctional, if they're not communicating, the decision is almost always to do nothing. Right? Almost always. So whatever that is, and if to do nothing means I'm going to wait for that sales order and I should be laying off these people and cutting back, well, they're not going to do that.
Right.
Because that requires a hard decision by somebody. So I don't think we can answer your question generically. There's lots of reasons that management teams fail. It could be that there's one bad person.
Yep.
It could be that there's no bad people, they're all good people, but as a team they didn't execute in that situation. But in a different situation, they might be awesome.
Right.
Right? And so I think that's probably as far as I can go with that.
Sure.
So this comes down to, again, we're talking about how to persuade a lender, which almost always correlates with doing the right thing and making change. So the concept here is that you failed. Doing the same thing over and over is the definition of insanity.
Right.
Asking somebody to give you more money to do the same thing over and over,
it's expensive insanity,
is crazy, right? So you need to change. You need to adopt the attitude that all companies with financial trouble, mid-market and smaller, because I don't believe this is true for larger, more sophisticated organizations. So let's call it 200 million in revenue and less. I mean, that's a bad definition, but it's an easy rule of thumb.
Just for us, yeah.
So you need to adopt, if you're in trouble, it's your fault. And if you don't adopt that, you're going to probably fail in your financing. And once you've adopted it, and not positioned yourself as the victim in this, but rather the cause of this, you can start to present, real changes to deal with that. And my next point here, I think we've already discussed, is this is not an indictment of individuals, although it could be. And I'll give you some examples of that in a minute. But it's complicated why companies fail, and it may be very much situational.
Right. I think what we see a lot, and this was kind of when we were discussing the topic, this one popped in my head, is we see a lot of companies that act as a family, or perhaps they are a family, or there's a notion there's legacy employees who either were founders or somebody's friend or somebody's cousin or whatever else comes in, and no matter how ineffective they are, management or the entrepreneur, the CEO, the president is led by feeling. Like, I either really like this person, or they've been with me through a lot of hard times, which obviously we never got out of, or they're the only person who knows what to do here. And that specific one, I think I can think of 3 of our clients or potential clients that we've encountered where a salesperson came highly experienced, highly recommended, had all the feelers out for the industry, regardless of, we had 3 different industries, and this was the exact same profile that we received. Very highly compensated in order to bring that person from their previous job, his previous job, to come to the startup or this smaller firm, whatever else, and underperforming, but nobody is looking to remove that person from their position. It's like you can't accept this person's failure. They're the only one who can do it. They have good feelers out for the industry. They know all the key players, all the key buyers, and I've heard you say the same thing 3 different times. And if we remove this person and we went through his email box, what would we find? Or his Rolodex, what would we find? And the answer from the manager has always been kind of a quiet, somber, nothing. Nothing of value, nothing substantial.
And it's always nothing.
Always nothing.
Yeah. It's hard. These people don't even need to be relatives or family or be in a weird situation that causes you to be soft towards them. The truth of the matter is mid-market and smaller businesses were not founded by people very often. We're not founded by people that want to be ruthless.
Yeah.
Right, and want to fire people, and you don't want to go down that path. That's not who you are as a person. It's not who you are in your soul, and so it's hard. It's hard for people. You need to. My advice to you on this issue is get a third party. Bring in Sinclair Range. Bring in some other consultant. Tell them straight up what you think the issue is, who it is, but get somebody else to deal with it. Right, because at the end of the day, if you don't make these changes, you're going to go down. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to go down, how many families have you screwed by not making the hard decision?
Right.
Right? I mean, that's...
Amplify what you're looking at. It's not just that one employee and his or her family, but the people who are pulling their weight and doing their best, you could be in a better place if you had just switched some people around or switch places. Yeah.
In episode 5, when we introduced this series, I read a quote, a comment that was on the Sinclair Range website from probably the most prolific troubled company lender in North America. Mm-hmm. And part of that quote was how would I say it? It was a bit of a frustration that the projections are a hockey stick. There's no changes being made. Yet every turnaround plan that we see, most turnaround plans that we see. First of all, actually, most companies don't have a turnaround plan. But
first thing first, yeah.
But if they do, and if you're a lender and you're receiving a turnaround plan, almost all of them boil down to tweaking of the existing business plan and having more money to wait out whatever the trouble is
Right.
in the tweaked business plan. And what most people know on the lending side is that money's not the answer. And I'm going to caveat that statement by saying that if you talk to them one-on-one, they know that, yet their business plan rarely enforces change.
Right, yeah, nothing changes and
So
nothing
they just give
changes.
more money anyways because they like
Yeah.
the deal. But they're going to prioritize the ones that have these points that we've talked about. So you've identified what caused the trouble.
Mhm.
You've identified who is responsible. So what do? Fire somebody,
Could be.
hire somebody
Could
to
be.
augment your management team, right? Our management team is not sufficient to deal with this situation, so we need more skills, different skills, maybe not forever, right? Maybe for 6 months, maybe for 2 years. Bring in external advisors, a board of directors, hire a firm like Sinclair Range or some other consulting firm,
Mm-hmm.
right? But make change.
Yep.
That's the key to this.
And part of managing your employees and not necessarily pinning the blame on someone, but taking an objective view on a problem that is very subjective,
Yeah.
especially in smaller businesses where you've formed personal relationships with almost all of your employees, whether they're positive or negative. It's a lot easier as a manager to fire somebody who you don't like, as opposed to somebody who you do like, regardless.
That happens all the time.
Right? I never really liked this. They rub me the wrong way. It's just the feeling I get, right? I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've ever seen an HR department or a management group with a clear set of expectations for every employee when we encounter a troubled company.
I'm going to say something very incorrect.
Okay.
I mean, it's dead on right,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to say politically incorrect, that's not what I'm going for, but there's a lot of people that are not going to agree with this statement.
Yeah.
Involving HR in this decision is a huge mistake. Huge mistake. Right? Because HR is process driven.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is the deck's on fire. And I might be 80% right about this person that I want to fire. I don't know if I'm 100% right.
Okay.
I haven't created a paper trail.
Yeah.
I'm willing to absorb the cost of this, but I need to make change. And I need to make that today. And I'm not saying all HR departments are going to resist that, but a lot are. Most are.
Fair, for sure. But what I'm really getting at is that there are very few managers, very few CEOs, or executives of these small and medium businesses that have, when you are in trouble, how do you evaluate each employee on whether or not they should stay, whether they should be augmented, retrained,
Right.
fired. My point is that nobody really has a proper valuation criteria, which an objective one that they stick to no matter what. That we're driven by feelings as humans, right? So
Yes.
it becomes a confirmation bias issue.
Yes.
Where I always thought that she was a great salesperson or she was a great operations person, but the numbers don't confirm it. So I'm just going to change how I evaluate him or her. So there's we kind of share management books at Sinclair Range. We almost had our own book club for a while there. With some excellent reading material on the topic, and we always try to educate ourselves further from some of the greater minds in management science. But Malcolm Gladwell is by no means great at this, and I don't think Blink was excellent on many points. But one story that kind of came out of that book is a law firm was evaluating on who to promote to partner. So they had a set of criteria, and out came two candidates where the board favored one candidate over the other just by feelings. And it became, one candidate came up above the other in terms of objective criteria. So their first initiative was, well, maybe we should just move the criteria around. Well, which one of these is a priority, right? And if you're going to set a criteria and you're going to evaluate people, you kind of have to set it in stone.
Yes.
Not kind of, set it in stone. that, and it doesn't have to be exactly the same for every department, obviously, right? Sales versus ops, whatever else. Those are different, they have different goals and different functions within the company. But if you're going to evaluate individuals within those departments, evaluate them all on the same benchmark.
So in part 3 of this series, we're going to talk about the business plan, like how to make change. Right, so part 1, you admit you're in trouble. Part 2, you define what that trouble is and who did it. And then part 3 is going to be what to do about it. Raise that again.
Sure.
In part 3.
You can do that.
So there's because I think it's a great point, right? Because this, to me, is about persuading the lender that you're willing to stand up and make the hard decision, right or wrong, right? I mean, the lender doesn't know if it's right or wrong, but you're willing to make the hard decision to make changes within your company. You have integrity. They're willing to make the bet on you. Okay, and to do that, you just need to make change, right? And that change needs to be, we fire these positions. Yeah. We cut back. Or we hired. Like, it doesn't have to be a firing. It could be a hiring, right?
Yeah.
We've augmented our management team. We brought in this board of directors. But I think the interesting point that you raised to me is that's never a one-time thing, right? So you need to persuade that lender, but then within your organization, you need to get people doing what you think they ought to be doing, right? Which is this whole objective performance review, for lack of a better word, right? And we're doing that with a client right now.
And it's an integral part of culture building.
Huge. And what's interesting about it is what you want people to focus on during a turnaround period. Let's define that as 12 months. I mean, it's different in every situation, but just for argument's sake.
Yep.
The criteria, the evaluation, the performance metrics, that's the word I'm looking for that 12-month period may be hugely different than what it would be once you're stable.
Right.
Right. And so I think this is a really cool point that we ought to talk about further.
But it shouldn't go away. It could change, right? Like you said.
It should not go away.
But it should not go away.
100%. I'll give you a couple of examples. We worked on a brake part distributor. So automotive, they were making pads and rotors and that sort of stuff. Rotors, that sort of stuff. Significant mid-sized company, distributor. And we were called from one of the Sinclair Range predecessor firm was called from one of the banks up Bay Street here in beautiful downtown Toronto.
You didn't introduce the setting.
I did not, as typical, introduce the setting. And they found a fraud. The company was on an asset-based loan. And it was a fictitious invoice receivable, which is not a very smart fraud, because your best case scenario is that receivable drops off the borrowing base in 90 days. And your worst case is they catch it next week, which is more or less what they did.
Right.
Okay? So it's not a well thought out fraud as far as frauds go. So they called the loan. The principal said, "Hey, we'll put in some equity, but we need maybe a couple months to raise that money. Our family has it, but our family's in a different country, and I need to go there, I need to talk to them, tell them what happened." And the bank thought to themselves, "I'd really like that money because I'm going to have a significant shortfall." Because it turns out that although I'm covered on paper, when I go and talk to my appraisers and they know that there's been a fraud involved, all of a sudden the numbers drop a lot.
Yeah.
And the anyways, the appraisals go down, and then you got to add in the receiver fees, right? And so all of a sudden I'm looking at a 50% haircut on an ABL load, which should never happen.
Yeah.
Right? And so I want this fellow's equity check before I call the loan, but I don't trust him. Right? So what do I do about that? And the answer is they called Sinclair Range. And we went in. And so what's the first thing you do when you walk into that situation? Now, this is not, we weren't trying to get a refinancing in this example, but we were trying to gain the confidence of the bank. And so we went in as an advisor for the first week. And rather than focus on the substance of why this company actually needed to create fictitious invoices, which is obviously because they were out of money.
Right.
Right? But rather than start by focusing on the turnaround, what we started was, in effect, a forensic review. So we went backwards, we did the audit, which seemed like a complete waste of time to everybody, right? And we came up with the bad guy. And we fired him. And we did that within a week. And then the next week, we weren't making this up, the guy was legitimately the bad guy. And then the next week we found another bad guy because he wasn't acting alone. And we fired that person. And then we started to go back and try to figure out what was wrong with the company. And by doing that first, the bank became a great supporter. Like, it didn't happen right away, but they became a supporter. We created that integrity where it didn't exist before. And we went to them and we said, here's what we found. Like, immediately we went to them and said, like, immediately within the first week of our mandate, this is what we found. It's already done. I'm not talking to you about this. Like, we found it. He's gone. Yeah. Our principal, our owner, is very upset by the whole thing. Nothing's changed other than we've corrected this problem. Now we're going to move to the next phase, and the next phase is going to be, the turnaround of the business. And you get first of all, it's the right thing to do, but you also get a supporter. And so, in the bank. And so that's an example of the power of this and making that tough decision. Another example is a printing packaging company that you have worked on repeatedly. Yeah. This was a company that was marketed out of the Midwest in the U.S. With an investment bank for, I'm going to say, years.
Okay.
Absolutely years. They couldn't sell the business. They couldn't refinance the business. It just bumped along. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't good. And it was being run by a president that had substance abuse problems and other related issues. I didn't meet this person, but that's what the story was. And actually, he was second or third in a line of executives with substance abuse problems.
How often do you encounter not necessarily just a substance abuse problem, but an addiction of some kind, whether it's gambling or...
I would say the combination of substance abuse plus family law issues is the cause of more than 50% of mid-market, smaller business trouble companies. Okay, and I would say that would have been my view historically. I may need to rethink that because I strongly believe that an aging demographic is also going to drive, or has been driving, a lot of this. And let me explain that a little bit. You always hear the M&A guys, and someday we'll have a mergers and acquisition expert other than me on this on the podcast Periscope. But the big story is demographics. It's an aging population, like some huge number.
Yeah.
80% of wealth in North America is tied up in family-owned businesses. And how do you extract that wealth? And the answer is succession planning. Like the Coors family 100-year, 200-year rolling plan, quarterly updated through trusts, and selling your private business to strategic purchasers, right? There's a whole industry that's been talking about that for 20 years that I know of, but it hasn't happened yet. But I'll tell you what is happening is these people aren't selling. Because picture an owner manager, say he's second generation.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have kids that are interested in taking over the business. I know we're off topic here. But he's 70 years old. And when he wakes up in the morning, what he's really thinking is, I feel pretty good. Why today?
Yeah.
Right? Why today? I don't want to hire that accounting firm or Sinclair Range to, run a process and have 18 buyers in here. And why today? There's nothing driving me. Somebody comes here and they're going to write me a big check. Yeah, I want to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I want to retire, take my family on a boat. I want to do all those nice things. But why today? That's what happens. And then why today turns into, I should have sold 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I turned into a troubled company. Right? Happens all the time. So, to me, I'd like to talk to more of a mid-market, stable company type M&A person.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I see a lot. So, anyways, where was I going with all of that? Oh, this printing packaging company with the substance abuse issue. When we were introduced to it, it turns out they'd hired a new president about 3 weeks or a month or whatever, shortly before that. And the first thing I did, I told the bank is, and the ownership group, which was a private equity fund, I said, yeah, maybe we could help, but the most important thing to me is what caused the trouble, and what are we doing about it? And so, well, we hired this new fellow. So I commuted there, and I met this new fellow, and I thought, I love this guy. Like, he was the guy I would have hired for this particular job.
Mm-hmm.
And we built the presentation to new lenders around that change, and it sold like that. We got the company financed, whereas this other investment bank from the mid-market, Midwestern U.S.
Mm-hmm.
for years.
Yeah.
Years were unsuccessful. Sold it like that. International sporting goods company we worked on. Big mandate. Lots of trouble. Wasn't going to get refinanced. Had failed multiple times. We first augmented management with me in particular, and then we changed some of the management.
Yep.
And it got done, and it got done for good numbers. Worked out very well. And the last thing I want to throw out is a company in the international products company working in the marketing and distribution space. I'll put it that way without giving away too much. Significant company. And we were put in a CRO, and I mistakenly agreed to a mandate that really gave us very little authority, well, no authority to effect change. And this company would not admit that it was in trouble.
We had the power to make a lot of suggestions, but not to actually execute on any one of our plans without the buy-in of people who were the issue, the problem.
Yeah. The company made no changes, wouldn't even admit it was in trouble, and ended up going under. Right? And that was a failure. And we put Sinclair Range in a position that I shouldn't have put ourselves in. I mean, of having no authority and not having the ability to execute on exactly what we're talking about today. So there's some examples for you to think about. Should we recap? Do you have more to throw in there?
No, I'm good, yeah.
Okay, what does this mean for management? If you're an owner management, you're working in your business, or you're a management team, thinking about what we talked about today, this is hard. This is self-assessment. Blaming yourself is hard.
Taking responsibility is hard.
What do you do about
that? Well, first of all, the first step is that you have to, be a little bit more open to understand that there is a problem, like what we've covered in episode 5.
Yeah.
And then be open to suggestion, essentially. And then from outsiders, which is, whether you have your advisory board set up or you're bringing in an external consultant like Sinclair Range, just to give you a fresh perspective on what's going on. It might not be what you want to hear, but the truth. You need to hear the truth. You need to understand what the situation really is in order to actually address it and remedy it.
Agreed. If you're a shareholder, an outside director, some other stakeholder, a professional, if you're an accountant, a lawyer that advises this troubled business, stop believing that they're victims.
of the economy, of the cyclical industry, of exchange rates, whatever.
You are doing a disservice to the organization if you don't force your management team to accept responsibility and make change.
If management is reluctant to accept responsibility, how often, there's two ways to go about it, is to make them feel like just because they failed doesn't mean they're going to be fired. Or should you turn up the heat and make it obvious that since you failed, you will be replaced? Which way do you go? Or does it depend on the circumstance?
I think it depends on the circumstance. My point on this is that the shareholders, if you own a business and you have this group over here running it, you're not paying attention day to day, and that group comes to you and says, man, the whole cycle in this energy sector has changed, and we're just screwed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can't get orders, we dropped our price 70%, and we're losing deals on price. Our rig utilization is, 0.
Yeah.
Right, and then as a shareholder, you hear this from your management team, and you like your management team. That's why they're there.
Yeah.
Right. Your reaction is, damn, that's terrible. Right. What are we gonna do about that? Your reaction is not, your immediate gut reaction is never, didn't you foresee that? Okay, maybe it wasn't foreseeable, but the minute it started to happen, what did you do about it? Right?
Because a lot of the time when we go into these situations, when we talk to management and they'll say something like, well, this has only happened, in the last couple of months. And then when we start digging through the financial statements, you're like, well, I saw red flags years ago, just looking at your income statements and your balance sheets that everybody will say this was an overnight thing, but very seldom are overnight catastrophes. An overnight catastrophe.
Yeah, exactly. Lenders, investors, giving them more money isn't going to help.
It's not about the Benjamins.
It's not about the Benjamins. There you go.
I don't often say that, but it's not.
You just did, so.
Yeah.
And you forced me to repeat it.
Yep.
All right. What else do you have?
That's about it.
The music's coming up.
The music's coming
You know
out.
what that means.
Fading in. We're fading out.
I thought we had 15 minutes of stuff to talk about. We've been 50.
It's usually like that.
Usually like that. Thanks, Olga.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. SinclairRange.com if you want more information. Hey, you guys, if you have topics you want us to cover, you want to be a guest,
Yeah, let us know.
let us know. Send an email. We're on the site. Sinclair at SinclairRange.com is a way to reach me.
We have a contact form. Just go in the contact us. On
There you go.
website.
All right. That's it. Cut